Let's do it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll be talking about Russia's national, I would say, state-forming drink, vodka. This alcoholic drink certainly needs no introduction. Some have tried it at parties, some have seen it on store shelves, and some might even recall Bloody Mary or Bond cocktails. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. Don't forget, dear friends, that drinking alcoholic beverages is harmful to your health, causes cancer, cardiovascular problems, and is a cause of liver cirrhosis, and is incredibly damaging to your psyche. Lastly, what is the basis of my research? Well, it's on the book The History of Vodka by historian and journalist William Pohlepkin. He collected enough information to prove to international commissions that vodka was invented in Russia. But I'm getting ahead of myself a bit. So let's get going on and stay until the end. There will be some harsh and painful truth about Russia that you've likely never heard of. First, a little etymology. What is vodka and how did this word come about? So, vodka means nothing more than water, but in its diminutive form. This form, as well as words in this form, have almost completely disappeared from the modern Russian language. They have survived, however, in the most ancient, eternal and never-dying words, like father, daddy, papa, papka, and mother, mom, mamka. Diminutives also exist in Russian personal names. Yegor, my name, and the diminutive is Yegorka, Pavel, Pashka, and so on. Now that we know the meaning of the word, we can move on to the history.
Give me everything.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
In 1977, our ally, some might even say controlled government, the Polish People's Republic, stabbed the USSR in the back. Representatives of the Polish People's Republic claimed that vodka was invented and produced in Poland, that is, in the state territory of the former Kingdom of Poland, the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, earlier than in Russian and Muscovite states.
Are you sure about that?
Poland wanted to claim credit for the discovery of vodka. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that there was a precedent in the international alcohol law. The production of all European types of spirits had a fixed initial date. 1334 for cognac, 1485 for English gin and whiskey, 1490 for Scottish whiskey, 1520 for German brand wine, schnapps. Thus, it was believed that there was no reason to make an exception for vodka. The USSR Ministry of Foreign Trade turned to a specialist to scientifically determine the date and conditions of vodka's appearance in Russia. I think you've already guessed who they turned to.
Who's that Pokemon?
William Pohlepkin. A crucial but very complex question arose. Where and when in Russia might the necessary socio-economic conditions for the emergence of the strong alcoholic beverage have arisen? To find out, let's rewind time and look at what the ancient Rus drank between the 9th and 13th centuries. For a simple understanding, we'll examine the 7 most popular drinks of ancient Rus, starting from the least popular. Ol or Olus, also known as Alui. This drink was in many ways similar to modern beer, as it was brewed using barley. It differed from beer in that, in addition to barley, hops and herbs were added. At the same time, it is clear that the term Ol was given to a very high quality, rather strong and noble drink, as only it could be brought to the temple in the place of wine. No other drink of that time enjoyed this privilege, to replace wine. Drunk in Berezovitsa. This term is absent from all Church Slavonic written sources, but from the accounts of the Arab traveler Ibn Fadlan, who visited Rus in 1921. It is known that the Slavs drank drunken berezovitsa, that is, spontaneously fermented birch sap, preserved for a long time in open barrels and having an intoxicating effect after the fermentation. Sikera. This term was used in Rus to denote all alcoholic beverages except wine. The word sikera entered the Old Russian language from the Bible and the Gospel, where it was mentioned without translation, as translators in the late 9th century had difficulty finding an equivalent in Slavic language. In Palestine and among the Greeks, sikera, made from date palm fruit, was essentially date vodka. This term disappeared from written sources by the 15th century. Beer. In ancient Rus, beer referred to any drink. If they wanted to designate a drink as alcoholic, they used the term created beer, meaning specifically brewed, created, like wine. The last 3 drinks we will discuss in person, because there are not a lot of memes for me to put in the video. Also, we haven't seen each other for a while, and as you can see, I have a hair now. Kvass. Kvass was an alcoholic drink in ancient Rus. Several types were distinguished. Regular kvass was a sour, low-alcohol drink, similar in strength to a modern beer. There was also a type of kvass called stewed kvass, which was as strong as undiluted wine. It's worth mentioning that in Rus, the word kvasnik was used to mean drunkard. Mead. The second most important alcoholic beverage in ancient Rus was mead. There were again 2 types of mead, boiled and fermented. Boiled mead was of lower quality than fermented mead. The latter was aged for 10 to 15 years or more and was the result of natural cold fermentation of honey with berry juice. There are known cases of 35-year-old mead being served at a princely feasts in the 40th century. For large gatherings, even at the court of the Grand Duke, boiled mead, a cheaper, more quickly prepared and more intoxicating beverage, was consumed. By the way, by the 15th century, honey became an export item, and cheaper drinks such as kvass and wine began to be used for domestic consumption. Wine. Wine became known in Rus in the 9th century, even before the adoption of Christianity. But right after the adoption of Christianity, in the late 10th century, it became an obligatory ritual drink. Until the mid-12th century, it was consumed only in diluted with water, 33% wine and 66% water. With the decline of Greek wine, imports due first to Mongol Tatar invasion and then to the decline and collapse of the Byzantine Empire, wine lost its popularity in Russia. Thus, the historical environment, including not only changes in the system of international relations and international trade, but also purely geographical changes, the shift of the Russian state's territory to the northeast, the transfer of the capital from Kiev to Vladimir and then to Moscow, led to a change in the nature of alcoholic beverages consumed. All this removed Russia from sources of grape wine and forced it to seek local raw materials and its own methods of producing alcoholic beverages. This is why the term made wine appeared in the late 30th century. It was this drink that would become the prototype of vodka. We cannot pinpoint the precise year when vodka first appeared in the Moscow Principality. This is because no economic documents from the 15th century directly identify the date of its appearance. However, indirect evidence suggests a 30-year period from the 1440s to the 1470s. What is this evidence? First, grain availability. Vodka production requires a surplus of grain. This surplus existed in Moscow for sale to foreign markets. The fact is that the Moscow state adopted a free field farming system much earlier than its neighbors. Consequently, the degree of arable land and the development of agriculture in the Moscow Principality were much higher than in neighboring principalities. It also had the largest number of cities and the largest number of tradesmen or urban dwellers than other principalities. Thus arose the idea of turning grain into something more expensive for export and domestic consumption. Monasteries, the center of science and trade. The monks in Moscow's privileged monasteries were the most educated and technically proficient people in the Muscovite state. They were familiar either from books or visually with the Byzantine practice of creating shikera, and could also learn firsthand or through visiting Greeks, if they were not Greek themselves, about the production of strong liquors in Italy.
It could be in this very room. It could be you. It could be me. It could even be John Cena.
Furthermore, only in a monastery could the necessary equipment be manufactured and tested. Uneducated peasants were unable to do so. Political and economic relations between the church and the Grand Duke were characterized by a high degree of freedom. The authorities did not interfere in the affairs of monasteries, hence the desire of the church to profit from the new product. And the third reason. By the end of the 15th century, endless wars with the Horde had made Moscow the largest and most powerful state in the region. A process of centralization began, subordinating public life to the state apparatus. Only under such controlled conditions could a new alcoholic beverage emerge. After all, the state acted as a guarantor of the quality of the produced product, and also began to tax the new invention. It should be noted that 1478 can probably be considered the latest date for the introduction of a tax on vodka. Based on these three, albeit indirect indicators, it can be confidently concluded that vodka appeared in Moscow in the second half of the 15th century, significantly earlier than in its neighbors, due to grain surpluses, autonomous monasteries, and the authorities' desire to tax the new invention. Well, that's it, folks. Now we know how vodka was created and when it was produced. I'm saying goodbye to you. Wait, what? What do you mean? Похлебкин lied. Yes, friends, breaking news. It turns out William Pochlebkin wasn't entirely frank with us. Firstly, there was no dispute between Poland and the USSR. William simply made it up. Secondly, Pochlebkin established the creation date of the grain wine, not vodka. I'll explain the difference soon. Thirdly, the USSR Ministry of Foreign Trade never consulted any specialists. So the question is, what really happened? First, let me tell you how vodka is made and how it differs from the grain wine. Vodka production can initially be divided into two major stages: alcohol extraction and the actual creation of vodka using alcohol and water. To produce good quality alcohol, grain is needed, typically wheat and rye, though barley, corn and potatoes are sometimes added. So the grain is cleaned, it is then ground and placed in special containers for boiling. Essentially, wheat, rye and other grains are used to make a porridge, which after boiling produces a large amount of starch. So we've cooked the porridge, but how will it ferment? To allow the porridge to ferment, special saccharifying enzymes are added. These enzymes convert the starch into sugar, which in turn becomes a wonderful treat for the yeast.
Sugar.
Back on the menu, boys.
When the enzymes begin to work, we get a sweet liquid. Specially prepared yeast added to the wort converts the sugar into alcohol, resulting in a mash with 8 to 14% alcohol. The mash is distilled in a special distillation column. This produces a raw spirit with 20 to 35% alcohol. The next step is sorting. Sorting is a mixture of water and alcohol. This is done in special closed vats, and then the resulting water-alcohol mixture flows by gravity through a special carbon column containing activated birch carbon. There can be from 1 to 4 such carbon columns, depending on the grade of vodka. Only after this can the resulting product be called vodka. So, what's so important about these columns? It's because distillation preserves the flavor and aroma of the original ingredients, whereas using columns produces pure, tasteless and odorless alcohol. Only this kind of alcohol can produce vodka. Rectification on any serious scale appeared only in the 19th century, and in Russia only towards the end of it. Wait, what's about Poland? When did the Poles invent vodka? It's very simple. Rectification appeared in the 19th century. Let's try to find Poland on the 19th century map. Alright, such a country simply doesn't exist. But to be honest, the Poles have exactly the same history as Russia. The word vodka appeared in the 15th century, but it was used to refer to a medicine. Then, like in our country, the production of bread wine. So what date then would be appropriate to use vodka on a national scale? Here's a concrete answer. 1895. It was then that a vodka monopoly was introduced in the Russian Empire. It was introduced for one simple reason: to fill the state budget. But the reason wasn't very publicly acceptable. It would only disappoint both alcohol producers and ordinary people. So the government launched a PR campaign. Real vodka must strictly be 40% alcohol, not overpowering in taste or aroma, and free of impurities. And of course this drink must be purified in rectification columns. Thus, by an early 20th century, vodka had become Russia's main national drink. And by the middle of the 20th century, it had become a global brand. The last thing I want to talk about is the impact of vodka on Russian society. The emergence of vodka in its modern form at the end of the 19th century played a decisive role in shaping our people's destructive attitude toward intoxication. After all, before the vodka monopoly, the vast majority of normal drinkers had a completely different drinking culture. Like most other people, Russian aromatic distillates were mostly consumed as aperitifs and digestives, while weaker drinks were typically consumed with meals. As a result, Russia at the end of the 19th century was, statistically speaking, one of the world's least heavy drinkers. Can you even imagine that? In terms of absolute alcohol consumption per capita, we were actually second to last at 2.8 liters. Only Norway drank less in the whole Europe. With the transition to modern vodka, diluted spirit, the situation changed dramatically. Domestic distillates disappeared from the country as a class, and with them the entire alcoholic diversity. Vodka, the only alternative, took over store shelves and consequently Russians' tables. And those normal consumers, accustomed to consuming strong drinks as aperitifs and digestives, found themselves in a desperate situation. Vodka, by its very nature, was utterly unsuitable for this role. Once on a table, it required an indispensable snack. Thus, a new type of consumption gradually emerged. Vodka became a drink that accompanied the entire meal, and naturally vodka was consumed in one gulp, repeatedly. Besides the drinking culture, historical conditions also worsened. World War I, the Civil War, revolutions, poverty and famine that accompanied them. And yet neither during imperial times nor under Stalin did alcohol consumption exceeded 5 liters of pure alcohol per person. So, how did a light drinking Russian at the beginning of the 20th century become an alcoholic at the end? Unfortunately, there is a specific date. On August 25, 1941, Deputy People's Commissar of Defense, Lieutenant General of the Quartermaster Service A.V. Khrulev, signed order number 0320 on the issuance of 100 grams of vodka per day to frontline servicemen of the active army. So by the end of the war, vodka consumption had become widespread, as refusal to drink could be considered by the High Command as a breach of military discipline or a basic lack of respect for the military. Almost the entire male population of Russia participated in the Great Patriotic War, in one way or another. And when the war ended, most of them returned home, bringing with them a culture of strong alcohol consumption. Thus, Russia began to drink heavily and continued to do so to this day. So, vodka is not an ancient Russian drink with roots stretching back centuries. In medieval Rus, they drank mead, kvass, and grain wine, aromatic distillates similar to whiskey, not modern vodka. Real vodka is a product of the 19th century, emerging with distillation columns and the state monopoly of 1895. It was the state that turned vodka into a national drink, standardized it, and imposed it as the sole norm. And the mass intoxication of society was a consequence of wars, disasters, and especially the military practice of issuing vodka in the middle of 20th century. So vodka is not a cultural tradition, but a historical experiment, the consequences of which we still feel to this day. Thank you for watching, guys, and I hope I see you in the next video. Bye.